Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Becker, and I will be leading today's webinar on 508 compliance. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to get into kind of the ins and outs of disability inclusive communications and outreach strategies and talk about how your organization can improve 508 compliance, which will also improve the inclusivity of your organization's communications. So we get started here. I did just want to go over briefly some of the highlights of the webinar so you kind of know what to expect. We're going to be talking about what is Section 508, how it impacts organizational communications, both internal and external, what organizations are required to be 508 compliant, and then for organizations that are not currently federally required to be 508 compliant, why they might want to become 508 compliant. And then we're going to give you some tools, resources, strategies for how your organization can improve 508 compliance. I want to give you kind of a quick intro to our company. Becker Digital is located in Buena Vista, Virginia, which is located on the western part of the state in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We provide marketing and public relations services to government agencies and nonprofit organizations. We are SWAM certified by the state of Virginia as micro, small, and service disabled veteran owned. We are federally certified as well by the SBA as a hub zone. That's a historically underutilized business zone, small business, and CVE verified service disabled veteran owned small business. Our website is beckerdigital.com. Online, we have a ton of resources. We've got blog posts, webinars, podcasts, all that go super in depth into some really prominent, essential topics related to communications, marketing, and public relations in today's the modern world. So be sure to check that out. All of those are free. I just want to give you a quick intro. I'm Hannah Becker. I'm creative director and partner at Becker Digital. I came from academia. I previously taught computer science and marketing at multiple universities across the U.S. I have a bachelor's degree from Mississippi State University, an MBA from Florida Institute of Technology, and a graduate certificate in nonprofit management. I've spent bulk of the past 10 years working with mission-driven organizations to improve their community outreach and really strengthen those relationships that help them better serve, their community. Additionally, I'm an outreach ambassador for Military Officer Association of America and am an adjunct professor at Virginia Military Institute in the Economics and Business Department over in Lexington, Virginia. I've got my email listed there at the bottom. Feel free to email me if I can help you out on anything. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn and would love to connect with you there. So let's jump into the content. So we're going to start off today by talking about what actually is 508 compliance. So 508 compliance is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Not everyone knows what it means, but basically when we're using the term in communications and marketing, 508 compliance means that your organization is following the Section 508 amendment to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So this amendment requires all information and communication technology, that's ICT, to be accessible to everyone, including people living with disabilities. So Section 508 was initially introduced in 1998, and then it was revised in 2017, just kind of updated as technology became more advanced and more widespread. So by ensuring that your organization's ICT, information and communication technology, is accessible and is 508 compliant, you're expanding accessibility to millions of people who are living with disabilities. And this is a key component of diversity and inclusion. To be truly inclusive of people with disabilities, an organization must be accessible. And this accessibility extends to the digital space. So this includes things like websites, social media, PDFs, and even emails. So what we're going to be looking at today is how you do that and what it relates to. So here are just a few examples. It's not an inclusive or, like a complete list of ICT that should be 508 compliant, but to just give you an idea, it is kind of a wide variety. This includes things like mobile devices, videos, multimedia products, any type of website content, PDF documents, online training, webinars, teleconferencing, computers, software, social media, e-newsletters, and even our more hardware, such as like copiers, printers, and fax machines. We're not going to get into that within this webinar, but we'll be focusing on the digital platforms today. So disability inclusive communications and marketing strategies are really a key component of having a robust diversity and inclusion initiative. Approximately 26% of the current US population lives with some form of disability. So some disabilities like visual and hearing impairments can make accessing organizational communications difficult, especially in the online space. So a little over 1% of the population, which is roughly 3.8 million people, are blind or have trouble seeing even with glasses. So to improve accessibility of our digital spaces for this population, we can do things like optimize our websites for screen readers and by using alt text tags, and we'll get into that in a few slides, and also to adjust like our background and text contrast so it would be easier to view for those with vision related disabilities. Over 5% of the world's population has a hearing related disability, which can make it challenging for people to access videos, multimedia communications. So it's really important that we include captions to ensure the accessibility of that type of content. And we see videos a lot, even more so now with social media content. So the percentage of our population that lives with a hearing related disability is expected to increase as the population ages, especially with the baby boomer generation who is, entering into retirement years. It's a very large cohort, and we want to make sure that all of our outreach and communications are accessible to everyone. So I think kind of a key thing here is that many marketers and communication professionals erroneously believe that people living with visual and hearing disabilities or any type of disability that limits your accessibility of the digital space will have technology like screen readers that's going to close that gap. And the reality is that screen readers are limited in scope. The way we design our websites may make it very challenging for screen readers to work and other assistive technologies. And so that's where we as marketers and communications professionals need to come in and, improve the accessibility of our digital space. Assistive technology, these tools, these software programs, they don't function properly all the time. And they don't function properly on all digital platforms. So approximately 60% of people surveyed that utilize screen readers reported that the accessibility of web content has not changed or has even become worse over the past year. So the majority of people surveyed that were using screen readers are saying there's been no positive movement here on improving accessibility. More than 70% of those surveyed believed that this was due to a lack of web accessibility awareness or skills. So I applaud you today, prioritizing this continuing education, because you are going to increase your awareness, which will, by hopefully improve the accessibility of your organization as a whole. So ensuring, adequate accessibility can somewhat be a moving target for organizations. And when I say this, because technologies and user needs change. So the organization really needs to stay up to date on updates to 508 compliance practices. Regular auditing of ICT within your organization can be a good way to routinely evaluate the status of your organization's compliance. Also recognizing, the vital role that this compliance plays in improving the accessibility and therefore diversity and inclusion is really important. Just because, an ICT such as a website or social media post is accessible to you doesn't mean it's accessible to everyone, including people living with disabilities, that may make it challenging to access ICT that is not 508 compliant. So we want to, improve our compliance, which therefore improves our accessibility and inclusion. So I wanted to talk a little bit about who is required by law to be 508 compliant. So currently, Section 508 applies to federal agencies and organizations that either do business with a federal agency or receives funds from a federal agency. So this includes government contracting firms and nonprofit organizations that receive federal funding. So failure to comply with Section 508 can result in legal action for these organizations. Given that 508 compliance enhances accessibility and inclusion, all organizations, including businesses that are not necessarily required to comply, should strive to be 508 compliant. To give you just kind of like an idea around that, 71% of website visitors who do live with the disability will leave a website if it's not accessible. In the US alone, the disabled community represents over 500 billion in spending power. Globally, the spending power is estimated to be 1.2 trillion. So, this is a market that organizations who are not necessarily legally bound to be 508 compliant are essentially discriminating against and also not connecting with and serving, which just isn't a good thing either, both ethically and also financially. No, failure to be 508 compliant can result in legal action. So it's just very important that organizations recognize the opportunity here to increase the accessibility of their digital space and also prioritize it as part of their diversity and inclusion initiatives. Increased accessibility by being 508 compliant can strengthen community and customer relations. It can increase brand loyalty and also market share. So a few tips for how your organization can improve compliance. So anytime, the topic comes up, I think people think that they're going to have to dismantle all the stuff they've already built online and start over. And that is not the case. You don't have to rebuild your website. You don't have to rebuild or, delete your social media and start over. To become 508 compliant, all you have to do are make small changes and revisions. These small changes and revisions can really go a long way in improving the accessibility of your digital space. 508 compliance is a process that should be routinely reevaluated as technology and then policies are updated. It's not a static situation. It's dynamic. It's always evolving, always changing. I recommend that organizations assign either a committee or a team to routinely reevaluate their 508 compliance to make sure that they're up on what that means in today's world. And then also you can hire a consulting firm that specializes in disability inclusive communications to help your organization improve its compliance and by default improving accessibility and inclusion. So before we get into the ins and outs of 508 compliance for specific platforms, I wanted to look at the most common 508 mistakes that are reported on US-based organizations' websites. So most errors fall into these main categories. So you can see low contrast over on the left is a major one. And this is talking about the background versus text coloring. We want to have high contrast because that's easier for people with visual disabilities to see. However, this isn't always used. Also missing alt text. So alt text is an important descriptor that screen readers use to kind of read essentially images that are placed on a website or social media. And it's a description so that the user can get, while they may not be able to see the image, they can get a detailed description describing it to them. Empty links mess with screen readers. And then also forms, online forms that are missing description labels. This can be impossible for screen readers to read, extremely frustrating. And then also empty buttons that don't really lead anywhere, or buttons that have really bad descriptions like click here. You're going to want something more detailed than that. And then also missing document language. So this is kind of, it impacts screen readers if you've got an online document and it's not saying what it is or what it contains. So while this isn't like an extensive list or a full list of all the ways that your organization's ICT should become compliant, here's just some main things. And I wanted to kind of go through this to make sure that you at least understand some key components of 508 compliance. There's a lot of really detailed information out there. I'll provide webinar registrants with links to checklists that are super detailed depending on your website, your ICT, and then also include it down in the comments on the YouTube video. So you'll have that. But the first component is we need captions and transcripts for videos and audios. So there are a lot of technologies and third-party apps available to provide this for your organization. Basically, anything multimedia needs to have an alternative method of understanding. You have to approach, kind of the content that you're putting out. What if someone can't hear it? How can they read the captions? Or if it's an image, what if someone can't see it? We want to provide descriptive information so that they can experience, the content and not be excluded from it. And that's where we lead into alt text or alternative text. This text is read by screen reader technology. So people with visual disabilities, they basically, know or can learn what the picture is about. So this description needs to be detailed, it needs to be accurate, it needs to be helpful. This type of information if you don't have this type of information, the user's experience for someone that does have a visual disability is really reduced compared to those living without visual disabilities. And that is what we want to not have happen. We want our ICT to be as inclusive as possible. When you've got forms, online forms, you want to make sure we have descriptive labels because that's what screen reader technology is going to be reading. Color and contrast is kind of like a design element. It's really essential to accessibility. We want to make sure that that people with visual disabilities who may have reduced vision can see a difference between the background of a website and the text. So for instance, we wouldn't want to use like a white background and then like a really light colored text. We're going to want it to pop out. And by the same token, we wouldn't want to use like a dark, like for instance, like a dark navy or dark colored background and then like a maroon text, because there's enough contrast. And then also we want to remove time limits on all of our online forms. So if there's like a time response, a time limit for completing something, well, one, it can take longer for people using screen readers and assistive technologies to get through the form, not necessarily due to them, but just how the technology works and how it reads things off. And then if there's any errors on the assistive technology, what it's delivering, that may take some time as well. And so it's really important for organizations to remove those time limits and to give, you know, the disabled community ample time to access that content. Okay, so I did want to talk about some tools that you can use, easily use to make your organization more 508 compliant. So section 508.gov is a great website. If you go there, they have detailed information on every type of ICT that your organization might be using, and gives you outlines step by step what you need to do to make it 508 compliant. For websites, there are a bunch of automatic accessibility checkers. So you can put your URL in and you can run it through, and then it's going to generate a report. And this report tells you what you need to improve on. So this is very helpful specifically to websites. The section 508.gov test tab has a lot of testing resources, not only for websites, but also electronic documents. So if that's something your organization utilizes a lot, I would definitely check that out. And then there's some really good accessibility compliance checklists, which I'll provide in the comments on the YouTube video recording of this webinar and also send out to you. So you'll have that. So all of these, or most of these, are free resources and can just kind of give you a good, like an audit of where your organization stands in relation to 508 compliance, and then kind of an actionable list of what you need to do to become more compliant. And I did want to talk a little bit about social media specifically, because I think accessibility of social media is something that is all too often not discussed in digital marketing. And while some of what we've already covered overlaps into the social media space, there are some nuances that I wanted to make sure that you and your organization was aware of. So alt text and image descriptions aren't just restricted to websites. You can actually also include those on your social media posts. So to write an effective alt text image, you want to describe what's in the image. So you want to spell out, or describe the colors, the context, the people, the environment, everything that's going on in that image. So if you, we have some more detailed information on our website on the blog about that, if that's new to you. So some social media channels do provide in-app tools to support alt text and image descriptions. So that's really great. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn do have functions there. And so when you upload the image to social media, you're going to add that alt text, your image description, which will improve the accessibility of the content. We also want to write social media captions in plain language, and plain language is not specific just to social media. We also want to utilize this in all our copywriting for websites and other type of communications that we utilize. Sometimes it's called plain writing, plain language. What it does is it increases the social media content's accessibility to diverse audiences. So you want to be thinking about plain language when you're drafting that social media copy. Just a few tips for writing in plain language. You want to use an active voice with a clear subject. You want to use don't stay away from less frequently used words and acronyms. You want to use familiar language. You want to prioritize conciseness. You want to avoid run-on sentences. Put the information in a really logical order with the important details first. And then if you want more detailed information, plainlanguage.gov has a whole checklist for writing in plain language that can be helpful. And then also, just like on websites, online, you want to utilize video captions. So I know Cliptomatic is an app. It's a third-party app that's really helpful in adding captions to social media content. If you're using an app like that, you want to just review it before you post it to make sure it's accurate. So the third-party software is not exactly 100% reliable. So what I do is utilize it and then review. Facebook currently automatically generates captions, so you're not having to manually add that in. And then finally, on social media, we want to use camel case for our hashtags. So camel case is basically every word in the hashtag, the first level is capitalized. And the reason why we do this is for screen reader technology. So screen reader technology, when it hits a capitalized portion of a hashtag, it's going to kind of insert a space in between each portion. And so it's going to read that word as a distinct word. If you have your hashtags written like how I have on the slide, the non-camel case example, the screen reader is just going to jumble all of that. It's just going to read it as a jumbled mess. And so if you're using screen reader technology and you're scrolling on Twitter or, any, or on even Instagram, you'll see accounts, they put 30 hashtags on there. It really decreases your experience quality as a user because it's incomprehensible. All these hashtags that are not written in camel case. It's just a jumbled mess. So we want to write our hashtags in camel case, which is capitalizing the first letter of each word in the hashtag. And that way screen reader technology will read that more correctly. Okay, so I know today's webinar covered a lot of information, and I really appreciate you hanging in there. I did want to show you, this is our website, beckerdigital.com. Under our resources tab in the upper right-hand corner, there's blogs. You can sign up for our newsletter. We send that out monthly, and it's just you can has links to upcoming webinars and resources you can sign up for. All of that's free. Our podcast, our in-house influencer network is Operation Influence, and then webinars like this one. So we record our webinars and we kind of maintain a database there that you can access. I would encourage you to look at. If there's anything specific that you're looking for, send me an email and I'm happy to connect you with anything that would be helpful. I know we went through a lot to kind of give you a little bit more insight into our services. So as I mentioned, we do marketing and PR. We really specialize in going beyond the screen to engage communities and develop meaningful relationships. And we use communication tools like social media, public relations, and digital storytelling to accomplish this. As a disabled-led business, disability inclusive communications and outreach is a true passion of ours. We do have extensive experience and past performance with government and community relations, working with rural populations, multi-general audiences, and the military and veteran community. So if we can help you out on anything related to that, we would love to work with you. If you have any questions about what we went over today, here's our contact information. You can also email me at hannah@beckerdigital.com and connect on LinkedIn. I appreciate your attention and look forward to connecting with you online.